Um, shall we start? Are we good to start?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to Bo, our guest here today, from whichever part of the world you're from. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again. Juxtaposition of your very soul. So I'd like to first say thank you for reaching out and actually agreeing to be interviewed on this show. That means a lot. And I'd like to read out a bit of introduction about yourself, and then we can dive deep into the questions that I have today.
Sure.
All right. So to all listeners, we have Bo Bennett here, who has a PhD in social psychology. He currently runs over a dozen of websites, written dozen books as well on the topics of critical thinking, and then he also teaches several online courses. So he's been in the self-publishing industry for over a decade and written multiple screenplays. So he has three general specialties: the social sciences, business, and also comedy, which is very interesting. Well, now these are three very different topics, but when I had a first look, nothing is related. But yet again, everything seems to be connected. So social sciences seem to be interlinked to how you do business with people, and then the comedic side of it, how you use laughter to connect people. I mean, that's really something. So yeah, let's unearth the above one by one. So how was your
Sure.
childhood? How was your childhood, Bo?
My childhood was
Yeah,
fantastic. Uh,
awesome, great. No
I-
childhood trauma.
no, no, no. It's funny though. I mean, I had it's interesting the way things are now compared to when I was growing up. I'm 51, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and back then, the trauma was very different, and there are I'm not saying that things now are bad and all wrong, but there is something to the fact that when you don't focus on trauma and focus on things and make it the core of your existence,
Mm,
and people don't like automatically sympathize with you and give you that kind of empathy and sympathy and attention, which in turn spurs more negative emotions and feelings from you. It's kind of like a vicious circle.
so
Then
yeah, yeah, that's right.
then you just go through it. So an example, my both my parents were serious alcoholics growing up.
Ooh, okay,
They were, and there's no secret to this. I mean, I wrote about it in my book. They
right.
would fight all the time, and my mom would like physically beat my dad, and my dad would like verbally abuse my mom. And I mean, it was. I cried myself to sleep several times. Yet, I said my childhood was fantastic and it was great, and overall it was. That part didn't affect me that much because when I grew up, I just learned to say this is the way my parents are, and that was it. I mean, they provided for me. My dad worked. He was what I called a functional alcoholic, where he would go to work. I
Okay.
mean, he would work every day and do his job, but then at 5 o'clock he started drinking until he passed out, usually like at about 9. My mom was different. My mom would, when she saw my dad get drunk, she would just get angry and start drinking, and she would drink during the day, and that was kind of a problem. A lot. Like sometimes when I was supposed to get picked up from school, I wasn't. My mom never showed up. But despite these things, they were incredibly loving parents. They were very loving to me. They provided for me.
Mm,
I loved them both very much until the day they both died. And I have no like trauma as a result of it. My life has turned out fine. And I don't expect sympathy, and I don't need sympathy. It's just something that happened and I got over it. And understanding that so many people are in worse positions than I was in. But now if you take that and put that in, like, what if that happened today? How
mm-hmm.
would a child grow up with something like that today? They may get like counseling constantly, with counselors telling them that they're disadvantaged and they're in a bad position, and who knows? I mean, it's that kind of that kind of feedback that I think is unhealthy for the most part. So I guess that was kind of diversion. I'm not sure if you wanted to go there.
No, yeah, I mean
With your
that
childhood.
went really deep.
There you
Like
go.
there will be questions related to that, but yeah, but thank you. I wanted to touch first on your career. Like, can you tell us in terms of chronology, how did you get your hands in all of these ventures and activities? That
Well,
yeah.
when I was growing up, I worked for my dad too. My dad had a workshop in his basement where he was an inventor, and basically that's what he did. And I would work for him doing like kind of monotonous jobs with injection molding, like making plastic pieces. So what I did is to pass the time, I took some of my sister and my mom's tapes. They had tapes on all these motivational speakers because they were both into sales, so they found that helpful. So I would listen to that, and I kind of got into it and hooked into it, and that kind of sparked my entrepreneurial spirit from age 10 on up. So I started like all these little businesses. Um, Through college, I had a business in college that helped me pay for college. And then after college, that's when I
Whoa.
got into my first real stuff, my businesses that really made money.
Wow. Okay, so and what about the psychology?
I
Was that
always was interested in psychology, but when growing up, I wanted to make money. That was like the top of my list.
the
I
ultimate
wanted
goal?
money. Yes. So I knew that I didn't want to go to school for psychology. I wanted to go for business, which I did. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s when I decided to kind of go back for psychology. I think it was my early 40s actually. But in any case, it wasn't until I was an adult,
Wow.
I had pretty much grown up kids that I did psychology and ended up getting my degrees then because it was something that I always wanted to do. And since my main goal was achieved, my financial goal, I could actually get into something that I was really interested in.
Wow, awesome. So, okay, you psychology, because I myself, I graduated as in accounting, an accountant, but have always been interested in psychology. And then one of the things I I had like some major trauma a few years ago, and that forced me to look inwards, and I thought that that's the starting point of trying to find out what this whole mind is and how this is creating our reality and all those things. So, but from an academic point of view, what are these logical fallacies that you put? Cognitive biases, critical thinking, reason, rationality, and why are these important?
Sure. Well, as part of psychology is, of course, understanding how people behave, understanding how the mind works. There are many
Mm,
different aspects of psychology. My PhD is in social psychology, which is basically human interactions or interactions with other people, beings, whatever. Uh, but cognitive psychology is also a specialty of mine, and that's really how the mind works, how we think about things, how we process information.
mm,
And early on, I got involved in like debating on different topics, and I found it fascinating that these arguments on the surface, they would look really good and they would be persuasive, but they were completely and totally
They're
wrong. And
wrong. Okay,
and
so
it
it's wrong. It's not trash, but it's wrong. But that's two different
yeah, I
things.
mean
They
it
they
could be
still have
both. You could
content.
say it's
Oh, okay.
Sure. You could say it's like it's wrong, therefore it is garbage, or it's garbage, therefore it's wrong. But you also have like trash arguments that lead to the correct conclusion. So it's this
Really?
interesting
Okay.
dynamic between argumentation, the premises, and the conclusion that it comes to. And I was really fascinated by that because I wanted to know like
Mm,
what's going on here? Like why is it so easy to manipulate people? Why is it so
yeah,
easy to
exactly.
feed people incorrect information and really get them to believe it?
Have
And
them
how
believe
could
it.
we
Yeah.
avoid that? Right. So that's where the study of logical fallacies came in, which are basically flaws with arguments. like their
Right.
problems with argumentation. Cognitive biases are kind of like uh, their hallucinations, if you want, with the mind, the way we think. So instead of seeing things for how they are, we see things differently because of these cognitive biases. So you put those together with logical fallacies, and you could see how reasoning, the whole process of reasoning and coming to the correct conclusions, could be completely uh, off the rails, could go off the rails just by these two things. So by learning more about these, I was able to, and other people will be able to think better, come to better decisions. Um, and this could help in all areas of life, your personal relationships, your professional relationships, financial. So
So
it's been helpful.
how are the study of social psychology has benefited you in your life and in
Well,
your business? Like, that's the next question
yeah.
because you sold it for $20 million. Like, I'm very interested.
Well, I sold my business before I started studying social psychology.
Oh,
So the big one, yeah.
okay.
So that's so like you could say no, it didn't help me, but I always had
Okay.
like a mind for psychology, and a large part of marketing is consumer behavior, which is very closely related to social
How
psychology.
the human
So
behave.
consumer
Yeah.
behavior is basically psychology applied to consumers and to businesses. So
Mm,
it's something I learned early on, but the social psychology in general, it helps you understand people better. And businesses are all about uh, communication with other people, whether it's in like
great.
direct speaking or if it's within writing, your written communications, how you're presenting your products, your ideas, your services. So it could certainly help you understand your market better and therefore make more sales.
Yeah, okay, that seems pretty reasonable and rational. So, okay, what was this business that you sold for $20 million? Is it one
So
business or is it like multiple businesses?
no, it was one business. It was one
Okay,
business.
okay.
After I graduated college,
Hmm.
I started a graphic design business. And the graphic design business, what I was doing is I was sending graphic designs to people by FedEx, and they would have to approve it, send it back to me. And it was like this really long, arduous process. And then I
Mm.
found out about this thing called the internet, where you could
And this
actually,
was back in,
this was in 95, like 90, late 94,
oh,
1995.
okay,
So I realized that you could put an image on the internet and somebody else on the other side of the world could see it
can print.
immediately, like in
Yeah.
color and everything. So unlike a fax machine that was black and white, so it was really like perfect for what I was doing. So I got into the internet and I got my own website and I learned all about it. I realized that very few people knew much about the internet or knew how to create websites.
At
So
the
I kind of
time.
learned that. Right. So
Wow. So you had the competitive edge. You have the edge.
yeah, so there weren't a lot of people doing websites, so I started a company that created websites and website hosting, and
Mm,
6 years later, it was a very large business that a telecom company bought us, like right before the
wow.
internet bust. So it was good
Oh,
timing.
good timing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it mean to be successful in your own words? Did you think that having achieved all of the accolades that you have at the moment means success to you, or is it otherwise? Hmm.
Well, I actually wrote a book called Year to Success, and that
Okay,
that was after I sold my company in
right.
2001. So it took me about a year to write, and it's a really thick book, like 740 pages or something. The first section in that book is how do you define success? And that's what it's all about because you can't try to achieve success if you don't actually know what it is. Success is like this nebulous concept, this nebulous idea. And even more confusing, it means something different to everybody. So
Yeah,
it's not just financial. For some people it might be, um, but that might be the wrong goal if they just go after that, because they're going to find out that they're rich and yet they're miserable. And
Unhappy.
that
Yeah.
happens to a lot of people. So in that book, I get you to explore the different aspects of success, what success means to a lot of different people, and you kind of define your own definition. You build up your own definition of success, and then that's something that you go for. That's something you try to achieve. So
So
for me, and it
yeah.
changes. Back then for me it was about money, and after I got a lot of money, then it was about, okay, I want to enjoy my time with my family. I want to build security, and and keep doing what I love. So that was it, and to that extent, I think that I'm very successful.
Well said. Okay. So what does being humanist mean to you? What does that mean? This is new
A
for me.
So early on, this probably happened about maybe about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
I received a book from one of my friends, and I got the typical line like, "Hey, Bo, have you accepted Jesus in your heart?" I'm like, "What?" So,
Like those
uh,
ones that come knocking on your door
yeah,
and
it was
yeah.
one of those things,
Okay.
but he was a friend of mine, so he didn't have to knock on the door. Let him in. Um, and it was interesting because I grew up Catholic,
Mhm.
and I was never like into it any more than I had to be. Like I had to go to religious school, I had to get the sacraments, and then I was eventually confirmed in eighth grade, which is just basically like a ceremony. And from that point on, I really never went to church again. I never thought much about it. It was just kind of something that you had to do. But my friend who gave me that book got me thinking about it. I'm like, oh, geez, if there is this God who's going to send us to hell and burn for eternity if we don't accept him, I should probably know about it. uh, and there are all these rules. I'm like, oh boy, this is something I should look into. So I spent basically 3 years of my life researching not just Christianity, but virtually every religion, every major religion that's around today, the differences between them. And that's when I got a lot into philosophy, like the philosophy of religion, and psychology, like why
Same.
we believe in these things, why people have this desire to live forever. We don't want to die. That's a really scary thought. So it became kind of clear to me that that a lot of these religions, they're all around the same themes, and those themes are psychological in nature. And yet, from as a scientist, a social scientist, and somebody in logic and reason, I could like definitively say like there's no evidence for any of this, and any evidence that would pass any kind of muster. So it's really like religions are a matter of faith, and if you're on that path and you want to go there, that's great if it makes you happy, and that's. But really, as like a scientist, somebody who's concerned about the world the way it is, um, I wasn't buying it. And then I kind of found out about humanism, which was, to me, it seemed to take the good parts of religion, and that's the parts that make you more compassionate to humanity and
Right.
to your fellow people on Earth. And I was attracted to humanism by that whole concept. So it seemed to be like the religion without the magic, without the woo, without the superstitions, without the unprovable concepts. There's no gods, there's no supernatural. It's just about relationships here on this earth now, and how to make lives better and take care of fellow human beings. So I kind of like that, and I got into that for a while, and then they kind of went really political on me. At
Oh,
least the
how
American
so?
Humanist
Like
Association.
oh, really? Like okay,
The,
we don't get. I mean, I don't. I'm in Malaysia, so definitely there's a new concept to me. What can you tell us? What is that?
yeah,
What happened?
so I was never a very political person, and I'm still not. I like, as a social scientist, I like to play the scientist card as opposed to the lawyer card. The lawyer card
Mm,
will pick a position and argue for it. They'll find facts to support it. Me, I like to play the scientist card, where I go where the facts kind of take me. So therefore, when it comes to politics in the United States, we have essentially two parties. one very left leaning, right leaning, so very conservative and very liberal. And then
Right.
there are issues all along the spectrum. And I always appreciated being able to look at any single issue and follow the facts and come to that conclusion. So all my life,
Right.
I've been a registered independent, meaning that I could vote for whoever I want, and I'm not beholden to any political party. And
Right.
if one party goes off the rails, well, I could go with the other one. And I have no there's no ideology behind it. It's really I could any issue, any facts, whatever. So I always that's kind of a big part of who I am, and it goes like hand in hand with the whole concept of science and the scientific method and so forth. So I realized quickly that the humanist organization in the United States was becoming extremely political, and their positions were not science based. And they were getting
Mm.
more and more away from science, away from reality, and more ideological. So I really wanted to have nothing to do with that anymore. So I kind of disassociated myself with that. But overall, in like humanism is a global idea, and it's practiced differently in different countries. And I know the British Humanist Association is very different politically. So I still kind of embrace that idea. I'm just not associated with them or that idea in particular.
Right. So when you were studying humanism, do you have to be affiliated? When I say affiliated, like, do you have to join them because of the research that you're doing, or you can just study it like, okay, I one morning I wake up, I want to learn more about humanism
Yes.
without even
Yeah.
meeting them, right? But then they somehow found you because probably you're famous.
Yeah. Well, it's unlike a cult that you have to join and you have
But
to wear a
yeah, is it
robe.
like a cult?
Yeah, you don't got
I
to do
wanted to say that. I wanted to
it.
say that. But is it a
Right, but
cult?
it
No.
is they do have a membership where you could like put your name in and
Oh,
you could be like
right.
an official humanist and have like a membership card and all that stuff. But you don't have to. Just like any religion or non-religion, whatever, you can just say, yeah, this sounds good to me. This is how I like to identify. Um, but eventually that you get to a point where the label by which one identifies no longer represents you accurately. And that's how I felt
Yeah,
with humanism. Because here in the United States,
that's
again,
the
when somebody
problem.
says a humanist, then all of that baggage comes along with it. So
Yeah,
I typically don't identify as a humanist anymore for that reason, but I'm still very much in support
in that
of
subject.
traditional humanistic principles as they apply to religion, as they apply to humanity and supernatural or the lack thereof.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was a really good explanation. I think the
Very
listeners
good.
would benefit from it. Okay, so could you tell us some of the books that you've written? And then, is there like a key theme across your books, or are they just as paradoxical as your life? As in, like the business, the
Yeah.
comedy, and then the social psychology.
Right. Right. So I would I would call them pretty much uh, lined up with critical thinking, psychology, reason. The vast majority of my books are in that area, but then I do have some strays that go in different directions, like the one Year to Success that focuses on self improvement. But I do have other books that really focus on like the psychology of self improvement as well. Positive humanism, which is a combination of positive psychology and the humanistic principles of humanism put together. So that's something that I wrote about, and then I have my memoir, which is like a comedy screenplay slash whatever, sort of a fictionalized version of my life, but really sticking with the facts. And that's my first foray into kind of like the fiction and the comedy. And then I wrote a sitcom based on time at a gym. So the whole sitcom takes place at a gym, and that's on YouTube now. It's
Really?
animated. Yeah. So
Okay, yeah. I read it then, but I haven't checked it out. I will. Squat, right?
yeah, it's called squatspotfitness.com. That's how you get to it. So that's I think people will really enjoy that. That's a lot of fun. And that
Okay.
and what's interesting about everything I do, it's all everything that we talked about, it's all a part of pretty much everything. So the way I approach comedy in the sitcom, if you watch that, you'll notice like tons of social issues in there, but
Oh,
approached from a
okay. I
comedic
like
standpoint.
it.
And
Educational
critical,
sitcom.
you're right, and critical thinking and reason, all of that's in the sitcom, built in the sitcom. But I don't push it on people as like a lecture. It's
Right,
built
right.
in
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
under the scenes
And then
where
with the comedy, it'll seep in better.
right.
Yeah.
People won't push it away. So that's kind of my hopes for that. And then everything I've written about like success and motivation, that is done from a scientific perspective, not a not one that embraces like let's call it the woo of the self-improvement and self-help um, circles. So it's done from a scientific perspective. And then of course, like even my scientific writing and my writing about logical fallacies and cognitive biases, that has a lot of humor built into it from the comedy. So everything is all like kind of mixed together.
Wow. So
Yeah,
if
so
there's a
all my books and
right,
website, all my books can be found at my personal website, which is bobennett.com.
awesome. So if there is a book or top three books that you would advise for anybody out there who wants to get in touch into what you're doing and just basically trying to understand, yeah, psychology, comedy, what would
Yeah.
you recommend? Which ones would you recommend?
So if
How many books have you written actually?
uh, about a dozen.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So yeah, if
So
top
it's a
three,
good
which one
number,
would
but
they go to?
I've met
You
people
want
that have
more?
written a lot more. Yeah.
Are you planning to write again?
Yeah, I love doing it, and I plan on continuing. I got a whole bunch of ideas for different books, so I'll keep doing that. Um,
Brilliant.
so if your listeners are interested in like logic, critical thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
reason, then I would say my top book is probably Logically Fallacious. That's a
Oh,
really good
logically
introduction
fallacious.
to
Okay.
reason and critical thinking. And then if you're more interested in the psychological part as opposed to the argumentation debate part, then I have a book called The Biased Brain. That's one of my newest. That is my newest books out, and that's a really thick, heavy book of like a collection of the cognitive biases and what they mean. And then if you're interested in kind of like the reason and the humanistic part, and you're questioning religion or your religious beliefs, the way that you were brought
I
up,
like that. I
take
like
a
that.
look at my book, Reason. It's just called Reason, books 1 and 2, and I'm soon going to add the part 3. But that's a really good collection of a lot of these different things that we talked about.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, right. What advice do you have for authors just starting out? Like, okay, maybe for myself, like maybe I would like to write a book one day.
Sure.
What is the advice that you could give?
Okay. Well, the first thing, if you are somebody who aspires to be an author, but you haven't done
Mm-hmm.
anything and you
Yeah, yeah,
can't
like you've
seem to
never,
get past,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Absolutely. Go to my new website. It's called
Okay.
bookbud.ai. BOOKBUD dot
Okay.
AI. And what that
Yeah.
is it uses artificial intelligence to help you write a book. So you could write and publish, and I have full information about how to write the whole thing, how to publish it, and just write any kind of like nonfiction book, publish it. And once you do that, that's the start of your writing career. You could publish it under a pen name or whatever. You could be done within a day and have your book published within a day. That's the magic of AI. And that's not about really about you um, expressing your creative freedom of writing, but it's about you becoming a published author and getting your feet wet. And the next one will be so much easier after you go through that process. That's the one that you can take your
Right.
time and spend a year writing if you
Oh,
want.
that was
But
good.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah,
great way to
that's
get
good.
started.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So get that done.
it like it lowers the barrier first before getting into the like, oh, okay, the stress of, oh, I've got to write, I've got to be tons of books out there, but I got to be unique. How do I start, right?
Right.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so another question. What is so important about being comfortable about uncomfortable ideas?
Oh yeah, one of the books I
What do
didn't
you,
mention was
yeah,
Uncomfortable Ideas, which, by
okay.
the way, we've spoken about a few of them in this podcast.
Yeah.
People don't generally like talking about religion, like talking about politics, and
Yes.
we
Such
didn't talk about
sensitive
sex.
issue, Reddit.
That's the other one.
Oh,
Uh,
yes, yes, yes.
there's a
Okay.
lot of these ideas that especially like in our culture, I'm not sure how it is in your culture, but in the United States, those are kind of like the general rules. Like you don't talk about these things, but more specific than that, those are kind of like the broad categories. But within those categories, there are like hundreds and even thousands of different ideas that people avoid because the conclusion is uncomfortable. So within this book, I
Mm.
really explore many examples of those ideas and then but more importantly the reasoning behind it and the reason, and I try to convince people in the book and persuade them why it's so important that these ideas should be discussed and should be talked about, and there should be no idea or topic that's taboo or off the table, because you don't get the well, there are many reasons, but one of the main ones is you don't get the full variety of the viewpoints to be able to come to the right conclusion. So
Yeah.
the more we avoid talking about different ideas, then the less likely we are to come to the truth. So that's my book,
Can you
Uncomfortable Ideas.
Yeah, okay. I don't you have that book, but I'm just very interested. Can you like take out a an excerpt from that book that I and then walk us through it? Like maybe because you said these are the taboo things that you don't talk about, but maybe one topic that you did talk about in the book, and how did that come to conclusion? Like how did it pan out?
Sure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One idea that I write about in the book is the marketing behind the military. So
Whoa, okay.
here in the US, like the
Okay.
military, they're kind of like on a pedestal. They're all treated as heroes, people in uniform. You want to salute them, you want to thank them for their service, and this is all great. And I should note that I have never served in the military, and I'd be terrified to do so. I would hate to kill anyone, and even more importantly, I would hate to get killed. So I am just not the candidate for that. Never will be, and I very much appreciate the people who can do that kind of work.
Right.
And that is the issue. See, without people doing that, without the kind of people that are willing to do that, any country would be in terrible shape. So we need
Mm-hmm.
to motivate people to do that. So how do we do that? And there's a lot of psychological uh, tricks, manipulation, whatever you want to call it, behind that. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
you you thank people for their service. You see them as heroes. When you show commercials, you show commercials of people like jumping out of planes and having fun. Like when you advertise for the military, you don't show the stuff like them killing people or pressing buttons where they bomb other countries and like all the really dark parts that we don't want to know about. So
Right.
it's kind of like a paradox in a way where we can't be completely truthful about this, because if we do, the consequences would be that not as many people will sign up for the military. So we need to kind of condition the people to support this military machine that we have, in order to get enough people to sign up. So it is one of those kind of like weird circles again, that you're not completely honest about what it entails and what it's about. However, that's the way we need to be in order for this whole thing to work. Um, so
Wow.
it's uncomfortable talking about the truths and the realities of military service, yet we don't want to do it because it would distract from people taking on those
Taking
positions.
on, yeah. So this is just from my knowledge. So every book that goes published in the US, does it have to be, I mean, do they have to be vetted by a body that, because if somebody's writing such a I would it can be controversial, and then it would cause like some, I don't know, commotion. How is it in the US? Like I know you guys, and this is like freedom of speech, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, how how is it that side? I'm very interested.
Yeah, you could essentially any author in the US could write whatever they want within certain limits.
Satirical, even anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
Okay.
very few limitations on what you could do. I mean, there's what might be classified as hate speech, or if
Yeah.
like certain topics, like if you write about like being a Nazi. I mean, you could even do that, I guess, but a lot of people won't publish it, or will have nothing
Mm.
to do with it. For example, I had an author. I run a book publishing company, and I had an author submit a book that is just total, let's say, nonsense. It's but it's hurtful nonsense. It's political in nature, and it's complete lies, conspiracy theories, like really damaging stuff. Like
Oh,
if people were to believe this, now I'm not in the position to tell him like he can't publish it, but I am in the position to tell him I'm not going to publish it for him.
for
I don't want
you,
anything to
yeah.
do with this book. And let me tell you, in the 12 years I've been publishing books, there's very few books I've turned down,
Mm.
because I think that this information is good to get out to everybody and let people make up their own minds. But with some topics, it just goes a little bit off the rails. Everybody has their limit, and I have mine as well, and that's when I just wouldn't do it. But for the most part, like for books that people want to publish, you're it's kind of buyer beware. When you're buying a book, you have to
Because
kind of do your
you have to
research
form
on the
your own
person.
opinion, and
You're right, and choose to believe what's in the book or not based on the person. And some stuff too is it could be classified either as opinion or classified as you're trying to establish a fact, or you're
yeah,
saying something that's either true or false. So
yeah,
you have to, like as a reader, you have to use your critical thinking skills and be able to distinguish between what the
psychology
author is
again.
writing as opinion versus
Yeah,
fact.
awesome, awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna pivot to the something a question that is an essence to the podcast that talks about self-worth and self-discovery. So, in your opinion, how does the process of self-discovery and building self-worth differ for introverts and extroverts, and what unique challenges might each face? I think I'm asking the right question to the right doctor.
So
Okay.
obviously, introverts are the type of people who are kind of like shy.
Mm-hmm.
They prefer to be by themselves or even with few people, as opposed to extroverts, which they like to put themselves out there. They like to get in, like they're the partying type of people, and they like to socialize with a lot of people. They feel comfortable around other people and less comfortable by themselves. So those are two general categories, but it's important to note that it is sort of like a bell curve, in that we
Mm.
have the majority of people are kind of like in the middle. They're, I think if you speak to the vast
Ambiverts, is
majority
it
of people,
called
they're going to say,
ambiverts?
yeah, like I like to be alone
I'm
sometimes.
introvert when I'm with the wrong people, but when I'm the
Right.
right people, I'm an extrovert. Yeah.
So situational factors are involved in there, like depending on who the people are, how you're feeling that day, like both emotionally and health wise, and what there are a lot of factors that come into play. But in general, everybody could kind of pin themselves somewhere on that spectrum on where they are. So that's the differences between the two. And in terms of self discovery, did you say
Yeah,
like
process of self-discovery and building self-worth. How is it different between these two groups?
Well, I would say that self discovery and self worth, it comes as a result of accepting yourself, and more than accepting yourself, but being kind of like proud of yourself in a way, like saying, this is the way I operate. I'm comfortable alone and I'm okay with that. And it
Mm,
doesn't mean
yeah,
that people don't like me, or
yeah,
it doesn't mean that I'm not worth any less.
that's true.
This is how I operate, and this is how I excel in life. So coming to that realization, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert the same way, just because, like, if you're an extrovert, you would say, well, the fact that I don't like being alone with myself doesn't mean I hate myself. It means that I just enjoy the company of other people more, and I feel better when I'm around other people, and I excel with the energy of other people and the ideas. So it's a matter of looking at looking at your situation, whether it be the introvert or the extrovert, and kind of writing that positive narrative around it
Mm,
and accepting that narrative. And I think that's very important, and not assuming the worst when there's no empirical evidence to say that you are a loser and people don't like you and that's why you're an introvert. That's just like
yeah,
negative thinking that's not justified.
yeah. Wow. Okay. That was a very succinct reply answer. Okay, so a few more questions. What
Sure.
is your heart's greatest wish?
My heart's greatest wish.
Yeah.
Well, my heart doesn't wish, but my mind wishes. So
Oh,
as
okay,
a
okay.
scientist, I have
Let's
to
let's
do
okay, let's
that.
let's okay, let's hear that. Okay.
Okay.
Well, so
Um,
what would your mind's greatest wish?
I don't even know if I have a greatest wish, and I mean, there's so many different domains of
You can even
wishes
break
and
it
what.
down like yeah,
Yeah, so
every
like,
aspect of your life, yeah.
it's like my family, my kids. I hope my kids do extremely well, and they're happy and self-sufficient. I hope I live a long time. I don't want to die young or die early. I think that would be horrible. That's a wish to stay alive. Um, I know financial security is a big thing. I want to be able to do everything I want to do up until the point where I die. And of course, you could say, well, you could solve both problems by dying young, and then you could be young, and
Yeah.
then you don't have to have that financial security. But I don't want that. I want to
Okay.
live long.
You want
So,
to live. Okay.
and
Okay.
then you've got the more generic ones for like humanity in general, like a wish that humanity continues to grow and develop and go in the right direction. And I'm very much an optimist. So when people,
You're an
I
optimist.
think,
Okay.
yeah, I think people very frequently will look at the way the world is going and just assume the worst. But I would strongly recommend a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. I believe that's what it's called. Um, by Steven Pinker,
Ah,
and that's a
the
fantastic.
professor.
Yes,
Yeah,
um,
at Harvard.
that's
Yes.
I think he's a social psychologist too, or maybe a cognitive
Yeah,
psychologist.
yeah, yeah. He's a psychologist as well.
In any case, he wrote a fantastic book that really looks at this issue. He explores the different eras of humanity,
Hmm.
and because people tend to be very pessimistic, like they turn on the
Yeah.
news and they just think very short term, like, oh, look what's going on today, the world is going to hell. But people have been saying that since the beginning of
Since
time.
20, yeah,
Yes, and it really
2000.
has at the beginning of time. And he
Yeah.
shows systematically and scientifically that by almost every metric, we're better off now than we've ever been in the past as like a race, as a human race. So I think that's kind of where I am in terms, because again, it's factual, science based, as opposed to
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah,
And
you're talking as a scientist right now. Yeah.
right, right. But also as a person who has emotions, being able
Yeah.
to, okay, I accept those facts, and now I could
Mhm.
feel emotionally about it. I could feel good about it because that's the way we are. And I hope we just keep on going in the right direction, despite the many minor setbacks that we may have. I feel like we're always course correcting, and eventually we're going in the right direction.
Do you have a mantra that you live by?
No, no mantras.
Okay. What keeps you up at night? Well, I'm really talking to a scientist. Okay, this is a good gauge. Actually, it's a really good experience for me. Because yeah, you're the first one that actually come up as a psychology
Okay.
academically.
But yeah, you
Okay.
can see, like, yeah, there's different ways of thinking, and when you think like as a scientist, your whole perspective changes, the way you look at things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I,
I see that.
I'll
Can
answer
I
your
see?
question first, but then
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
give you an amusing anecdote.
Right.
Um, So what keeps me up at night? Nothing really
Yes.
keeps me up at night. I have no problem going to sleep. But what wakes me up in the morning,
Okay.
I get
Yes.
up
Oh,
at
yeah. I
about
was
four
okay.
o'clock in the
Normally,
morning. Is that
normally
a
I,
different question?
yes, no, no. Normally, I ask two different questions. It's whether it's what gets somebody up in the morning or what keeps you up at night. So for you, I chose
Okay,
it to be what keeps you up, and then you're the first person to actually said
switch.
the yeah.
Well, the
Brilliant.
fact
Okay.
that nothing keeps me up at night is basically speaks to my comfort with who I am and where I am in life. Like there's nothing that I worry about. I feel good about my kids where they are. I feel confident that they're doing the right thing. I feel like safe. Like nothing really worries me. Um, I don't worry about these political issues or things because I feel like things are under control and I there's very little I could do about it. You know, I think that the
Yeah, yeah,
things
that's
that
right. Yeah, the
that
control.
need attention, people are doing something about it or trying to at least, and I could put those aside. So in that aspect, nothing keeps me up at night. But what gets me up in the morning is all these things that I want to do. I've got tons of things and tons of ideas, and I always feel like one lifetime isn't enough. Um,
Yeah.
which I sometimes I wish I were like a Buddhist or one of the religions where you believe in multiple lives, so I could come back and
Yeah,
do all these things.
reincarnations.
But that's one of the positive aspects of humanism again, and
Humanism. Yeah,
it is the fact that look,
exactly.
this is I believe this is my one life, and I need to make every minute count. There's no afterlife. I don't live for eternal. I'm not going to live eternally. I don't believe that. So it's so important that every single moment that I don't waste it. And that's kind of my and that's one of the reasons I get up at 4 a.m. I don't like to waste time sleeping.
Wow.
I do perfectly well with 5 hours sleep a night.
Really? Really?
Yeah,
So you operate on 5 hours of sleep on average?
yep. And with the caveat, I do very often I'll take like a 20-minute nap during the day when I
Ah,
just
okay.
completely shut down. Like I
Right.
just so
Power
I'm
nap
not like
and then
the safest driver. Like or when I do
oh,
know I'm tired, I'll pull over or something. But that's a side effect of sleeping 5 hours a day. I get extremely tired, but then I take a nap and I'm completely refreshed. So it's not like I'm tired
right,
all day. I just need that
right,
nap and then I'm refreshed.
right. So has that sleeping 5 hours really helped compared to sleeping 7 hours? Because they
Well,
say
it's
sleep is
helped me, yeah,
important.
more time. I mean, do the math. You have an extra even like 2 or 3 hours a day times 365 days. I mean, it just, what would you do with all that extra time? And you could do it if you look up like sleeping patterns and some
Hmm.
of the more conservative scientific literature will say like everybody is different and you need enough sleep, but nobody ever knows what enough sleep is for any particular person
Mm,
until
mm,
you actually try. And what
mm.
keeps a lot of people from doing this is you can't try it like just in the short term because you will be tired. If you're used to
Yeah,
getting 7 hours of sleep for like, decades, and then you try
yeah,
to go 6, that's a quick
yes.
change and that's a drastic change, but your body will get used to it. So I encourage people to try it and ask yourself the question, what am I going to do with this extra time? Uh, you'll be surprised at all the things you could accomplish. Um, I did promise you that anecdote though. So before I go off
Yeah, yeah,
another
yeah.
thing.
Okay, yeah. Anecdote, and then there's one last question for me.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
please go ahead.
So you're talking
Okay.
about like scientific thinking and the
Yeah.
difference between that and maybe someone who might be a little bit more spiritual, a little bit
Yes,
more
that's right. That's usually the other side of the spectrum. So yes.
yeah, a little bit more accepting of non-proven ideas that people who don't
Mm-hmm.
require like empirical evidence or
Right.
we'll say like
Exactly.
those are kind of the two halves. One
Yes.
example I like to use in self-help is this whole idea of the law of attraction. Have you heard of
Mhm.
that before?
Of course. Yes.
Okay. So and this is a great example because there are two sides of it. One is the very spiritual, supernatural, wooish type of approach where the concept is, you just think about what you want and you send whatever vibrations throughout the universe and the universe will provide it to you. And that's kind of like very magical, mystical. Um, but yet there's an extremely practical side to this, and that's when
Mm-hmm.
you tend to focus on things and your mind is constantly thinking about it. The actions that are associated with your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
become behaviors, and you do things to help you achieve that goal.
Achieve that vision.
So, I mean,
Mm.
it's like 0% magical or mystical. It's all science, and there's no supernatural part about it. But see, if you understand that and you accept like the natural and the scientific, you can use that concept so much more effectively than closing your eyes at night and wishing for things and hoping that
To
money is going to
happen
end up on your
magically.
doorstep the next morning through some magical force or through some universal uh, creators that bring you things.
Intervention.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of taking control of things. So that's like a really good example of how like at least in my view, like this kind of thinking can help you in so many ways because it helps you take control over your own life and not kind of pass things off to the magical or the mystical.
To the, well, to the ether.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then
And a note about like spirituality. There's so many you could define spirituality in so many different ways, and like for me, I think that I'm spiritual in the way that I do kind of see like all life connected in a way. And when you look at life from scientific again, uh, evolutionary perspective,
yes.
it's just amazing how you could see like we are all the same,
Yeah.
and that allows you like it kind of like this. It's not irrational, but it's irrational. So that's the term. Irrational is when there's no rationality associated with it, but it's not against rationality. So it's just something where you could say, I could see how we're all connected. Therefore, it's important to me to treat life with like respect. Like if I see a spider in my house, I'm not going to kill it. I would feel horrible if I did that. I would take the time, I would trap it, and I would bring it outside. That's my humanism. You know, of course, it's not humanism, but it's life. You know, and that's kind of the spiritual part of who I am.
I guess
And
humanism can be taken as the bridge, a safer center for, I mean, for people who's dabbling into the science side of it and the spiritual side of it. Because um, growing up, I was in school, I was a science student, but then after just recent years, I started going learning more about spirituality. So now you're talking about humanism. This is a again a new concept, but then it makes sense because it's talking very much about the 3D, right? Like, yeah. So,
yeah, but it's interesting, like the differences and the dynamics between
yeah,
science and people who are more spiritual in the classic sense, and in that usually the spiritual people will have a narrative that that aligns with reality. And let me tell you what give you an example of this. My brother and his wife are
okay,
extremely religious, and they create a narrative around everything having to do with their religion.
right.
So, like, my sister-in-law's mother was in the hospital, and she's very old, so was she going to die? Was she going to be okay? Um, there, her, my sister-in-law, her narrative that she created was that Jesus will do the right thing
To
for her.
lift her from this
Right.
illness or to,
Exactly. Or restore her. So whatever happens, Jesus wins, you know, because if she dies, well, then Jesus decided to take her. If she recovers, well, Jesus decided to heal her. So, I mean, that is just like from a scientific perspective, that's nature. I mean, people either die or they don't. And the reasoning behind it, you know, why does that happen? Uh, well, because you could look at like a myriad of factors having to do with the care that they're getting, the internal body, like what's going on physically. And I mean, it's incredibly complicated. Not the average person could figure this out. You need like doctors, medical experts, you need people, statisticians, like everybody, the collective knowledge could give you like a scientific answer or a narrative, create a narrative about it. But most people don't do that. Most people, they want a simple narrative. So the idea that there's this somebody looking over making the decision, ultimately it comes to the same conclusion, right? I mean, they're either going to
Yeah.
die or they're not going to die. But it's just a narrative that they decide to create around it that makes them comfortable
Yeah.
with the choices. So either way, they're
Or
happy.
maybe
So
more accepting of the outcome afterwards.
exactly,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, right. So either way that they're happy, they're accepting of the outcome, and that's great. So while somebody might be mad at nature, mad at the world, but if somebody thinks that, well, they're going to a better place and this is the plan, then great. It doesn't do any harm. I don't care, but it's not the way that I think. But by the way, my sister-in-law's mother did recover, and she's
Okay.
doing fine.
Okay, we're great to
Anybody's
hear
story.
that.
So Jesus decided not
Jesus
to take her.
decided to, yes. Oh gosh, this is a very, yeah. Well, okay. Before I even say my thanks, let me just ask you one more last question. So if you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening and the world as your legacy, what would it be? A
I'm
quote.
sorry, create a what?
A quote. A quote.
A
So it's,
quote.
yeah, a quote. So it's like dash Bo Bennett 2023.
Right. Well, what's interesting about that is when I wrote Year to Success, it has like hundreds of quotes in the book. And
Okay.
I submitted those quotes to like all of the quote sources on the internet. And you could find my quotes everywhere now. They're like
Really?
constantly shared on
Oh my
Twitter.
god.
Yeah.
Maybe I
They're,
might have seen it, but I just,
I'm sure you
yeah.
did. I'm sure you did.
I
I've
just, oh,
commented
I
like
get to
on
speak to
everything.
the creator of the quote. Okay. So if you,
And you think like I'm some famous person in history, but I'm not. I'm just a guy who submitted his quotes early on, like back in the early 2000s, to all these quote websites that were just starting out that were thirsty for quotes, and now I'm everywhere.
oh, okay. This is
So
a different turn. Okay, but if you had to
yeah,
choose a quote that's your, like, I don't want to say maybe your favorite or like the one that is very impactful or significant to you, what
right.
would it be?
Be reasonable. That's it.
Yeah,
I think it's a quote. It's a command. It's an instruction,
that's
and
true.
it's a way of life.
It's a way of life. Yeah, just
Yeah,
be reasonable. Can
be reasonable.
be moderate in in everything, in anything, in everything.
Yeah,
Wow, perfect. I think we're right on time, Bo. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoy your insights, your experience. I think your knowledge, you're very knowledgeable, and I'm learning so much from this session
great.
today.
Thank
I
you.
am following. I don't know if you have Instagram. No, you don't. But
I do have an account. I don't use it though very much.
okay. No, because the reason I asked was because I wanted to clip out some of the parts of the podcast and just do the promotional thing there. So, well, if you're okay with that, you can share it with me. But if you're not, then it's fine. I mean, I see you have Facebook, so yeah, I could send it over that side.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you, Bo, and maybe speak
Yeah,
to you
thank you.
again soon. So if I do see your name on any of the quotes, I would be sure to. Hey,
Yeah. Hey.
Yay, I spoke to him. Okay, thank you so much, Bo. You have a good day.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.